Welcome everyone to the webinar. We're just going to give people about a minute or so to join the room and then we'll get started. Very good. We'll go ahead and get started. Thanks to everybody who's joining us this morning for our webinar and discussion today on understanding and managing our reactions to COVID-19. My name's Ann Murphy, and I'm going to just introduce the webinar and do a little bit of facilitation, but in a minute here, I'll turn it over to my colleagues. I just wanted to give a tiny bit of background on the hosting of the webinar. So some of you may be aware that we have a grant from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration called the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center for the Northeast and Caribbean. And it's part of our charge to do training and technical assistance to both the mental health workforce as well as other health-related disciplines to be able to support mental health and people living with mental health conditions. So today's webinar is delivered in partnership between Rutgers SHP, Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions, and the MHTTC. So just very briefly, we're funded as the MHTTC to provide this training and technical assistance, and particularly at this time, we're delivering a lot of training and support around COVID-19. If you're interested in receiving emails from the MHTTC regarding trainings, webinars, resources, online self-paced courses, etc., you can subscribe to receive our mailings at this link. We will be sending you a very brief survey after the conclusion of this webinar. We're interested in your feedback. This is also a way that we show our funder that we have people participating in our activities. So it really is very brief. It takes like 1 to 2 minutes to complete. So you'll receive that in an email following this webinar. If you could complete that, we'd be very appreciative. We did also just want to let you know that we are recording this session today and we'll be posting it and distributing it. So if any of your colleagues or your students or staff want to view this, it'll be available along with a copy of the slides and also a resource document. I will turn it over to my colleagues. So facilitating or leading the webinar today are 3 of my colleagues, Amy Banko, Brittany Stone, and Giovanna Giacobbe, all instructors in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation. And I will turn it over to Amy to begin.
Thank you, Anne. So we want to thank all of the attendees for coming today from the SHP community. I know that you guys have a lot on your plate and are working very hard and diligently through the COVID-19 crisis. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. For today's session, we're going to define the COVID-19 crisis. We're going to really dive into how the body reacts to stress and distress. We're going to give you some ways to mitigate some of the disruptions that you may be experiencing from COVID-19, especially cognitive disruptions. And we're going to practice techniques to reduce physical and emotional stress. So ultimately, building resiliency is on today's menu, right? If you look at disaster mental health counseling, you help people build resiliency by providing psychoeducation about trauma responses, by developing new coping skills and utilizing existing coping skills and encouraging connection. And that's what we're hoping to do today. So when you look at the slide, right, you see this odd picture. This person is clearly struggling, right? But it spoke to Giovanna, Brittany, and I, because this person may be experiencing some distress or struggle in work or school life. And as Brittany and Giovanna and I were developing this content and we were having discussions with students, with faculty, with staff. We heard people sharing things that were overlapping, right? They had common concerns surrounding COVID-19 pandemic. In our discussions, these themes started to emerge, one of which was, this is hard. And we started sharing all the ways in which this is hard, the whys, right? Why is this hard? So if you could, take a second and think about your why. Why has this been so hard in adjusting and navigating COVID-19? Why is this hard for you? And if you'd like, you can share in the chat box. So if you use your cursor and go down to the bottom of the screen to your toolbar, you'll see that chat feature, and you can type in there to us why this has been particularly hard. And we're going to share with you right now some of the things that people have shared with us in confidentiality, and we'll keep that anonymous. People said, right, the SHP community at large said that this is hard because it's a disruption to their life, to their routine, to how we as SHP congregate or don't congregate, how we learn as students, right? It's changed the way we teach as instructors, how we practice our field, right? This is hard, people said, because there's an abundance of uncertainty, right? And uncertainty is not where we typically thrive, right? How long is COVID-19 impacting us as a community? How long will we experience social distancing? How long will we have to instruct remotely or attend classes remotely? How will we manage our clinical roles, right? Remotely. People have said this is hard because it's an unprecedented health crisis. This is a novel virus, and it's impacting people on such a wide spectrum of symptoms and severity of symptoms, and that is so uncertain. This is hard because it compromises our safety. Seemingly benign tasks, going to class, going to campus, hugging a classmate, meeting with a professor during office hours are no longer safe, right? These are things that can introduce this pathogen to us, to our friends, and to our family. People have shared that this is hard because we're juggling roles. We are now expected to work and teach and do all of our home life in the same location with all of the people that we're residing with. And these boundaries get blurred. They bleed in and creep into each other, right? People say when they're referencing managing COVID-19 that we are living in a new normal, that we are navigating a different landscape, that we're adjusting to changes or making this transition. All of these statements are these euphemisms, right, that inadvertently minimize our experiences and downplay what this new reality is. And what this new reality is that we are in a pandemic, and a pandemic is a form of a natural disaster. A disaster follows a crisis or an emergency when people have a disruption in meeting their basic survival needs, or there is serious and immediate threat to human life and well-being. Normal procedures are suspended and extraordinary measures are taken in order to divert additional crisis or loss of life. Disasters cause trauma, increase distress. They are a time when people are overwhelmed and struggle to function with normal coping skills. And this is an unusual disaster. This disaster is even more burdensome. Disasters are phasic. There are 5 phases to a typical disaster. And the impact phase, the first phase, when disaster strikes, on average lasts 0 to 48 hours. We are on day 37 of New Jersey's lockdown, right? And the clock is still ticking. We are all experiencing disaster trauma, which has adverse impact on our psychological functioning and our overall wellness. The reality is no one who experiences a disaster is untouched by it. However, there are things that we can do to build our resiliency, to ensure that we come out on the other side, and we will. And when we do, we are well and we are whole and we are able to move forward. The first part of building resiliency, we're going to address in the next couple of slides, is to build your knowledge and understanding of how your body reacts to disaster, distress, and traumatic stress, because knowledge is power. In the last half of our session, we're going to supply you with additional techniques and tools to reduce your distress and draw support from our SHP community. So let's take a look at what are some of the natural reactions to disasters. And I can't emphasize this enough, right? These are natural reactions, normal reactions to an abnormal event. And the first domain of reactions is our emotions, right? We can experience intense emotions, as you see here. Do any of these emotions resonate with you? If you like, you can share in the chat box some of these emotions that you're having and processing. Brittany is going to be responding. Right? These are intense emotions, and they are common reactions, and they can be difficult to identify when you're in the thick of the experience, right? And while hard to identify, these strong emotions can be even more challenging to manage them. At times, you may be unaware of the antecedent or the triggering factor to these feelings or emotions, and that can be scary, to have such impactful and intense emotions without pinpointing an obvious reason. But moving forward, guys, you can practice self-compassion and remind yourself that the reason for these emotions is the traumatic stress and distress related to COVID-19, but also to honor that you are doing all that you can with the tools that you have to cope and manage. We'll be reviewing today some techniques to assist in assessing where your emotional distress is at, as well as techniques that will be really assistive in reducing that emotional distress. The next domain that we're looking at, right, the normal response to an abnormal event is the physical reaction. Traumatic stress can present physically or somatically and is a byproduct of our hyperarousal to this distress and trauma. Our body is such a good gauge of our stress level, right? Your body takes the brunt of that traumatic stress. So take a quick scan, explore your physical reactions. And again, if you like, you can share in the chat box. As you're doing your scan, take note, are you holding tension in your body? Common areas of tension can be your shoulders, right? Holding them way up high and tight. Your jaw, your arms, your hands, your legs. Are these areas relaxed and loose? Are they holding tension and tight? As this tension continues throughout the days and weeks of this crisis, it can result in body aches and pains, which can be very unnerving if you don't realize it's stress related. Right, my friend, she was having concerns that she might have been coming down with COVID-19, and she hadn't left her house in a month. But some of the things that she was experiencing were related to this stress reaction, right? Additionally, the body's hyperarousal can elevate your heart rate. It can cause difficulty sleeping, right? Inability to fall asleep or stay asleep. You can have reduced energy or fatigue. You can feel like on edge, just easily startled. These physical reactions can be anxiety-inducing if we don't make the connection again that they're related to our experiences of this trauma, right? And we're going to be going over techniques to address reducing hyperarousal as well as this physical stress moving forward. Next, when we look at our additional response domains, we can see that we have cognitive reactions to trauma and distress. Now you might be wondering, how does stress impact my cognitive functioning? Well, a lot actually. Let's do a quick check-in. Have you said in the last few days or the last few weeks, I can't remember what I did with this. I can't recall saying this. I don't remember what I have to do for work. I don't remember what I have to do for school. Have you in the last few days or weeks said I couldn't find or locate something? Or have you felt like I'm unmotivated? I don't want to do my finals. I don't want to study for my finals. I know I have to. Or I don't want to do that report that I owe to the chair, but I know I have to, right? Have you been saying like things take me a lot longer to complete? Or I'm not as creative as I was previously? Do you feel flustered when having to make a decision, right? Are you making more errors than usual? Or me, like my favorite is, I'm so sorry, can you repeat that? Can you say that again? Right? So if you want, go ahead and share some of these things in the chat if you're comfortable. But we need a lot of physical energy to do our cognitive work. When we are in a constant state of hyperarousal, when we're doing so much, when we're worrying, when we're having circular thoughts and ruminating, that sucks up our energy. Our energy is finite, right? Disruptions to cognition can significantly impact our success and our satisfaction at work or school, and make us feel very insecure or vulnerable in our ability to function in our roles. Brittany later on will be talking about some compensatory strategies to offset these concerns, while Giovanna and I will be providing ways to calm the body and to quiet the mind so that you can focus more and be effective in your day-to-day. The last domain that we're going to go over in terms of reactions to disaster trauma is interpersonal reactions. Connecting with others right now can be so challenging due to social distancing, but even more so because our relationships and connections are further impacted by these normal interpersonal reactions to disaster and trauma. So be mindful and take inventory. How are you engaging or not engaging with your friends, your classmates, your colleagues, or family? Are you withdrawing from others? Do you attempt to connect, but your outreaches go unwelcomed or not received? Do you find yourself easily angered or quick to snap at others? I know my son, he was eating a piece of candy for like the third time the other day, and I snapped, and that's not typically like me, right? That's a red flag for me that I am having these disruptions, right? This normal reaction to this abnormal event. So go ahead and share if you'd like. Connections are key, though, to the recovery phase of disasters. If we think about other disasters that have occurred in our town, our state, our country, there'll typically be an observed period where people come together, right, in a sense of unity and community to support the recovery efforts and to collectively heal. And when we talk about healing, I think this is so important, especially for our community, because here at SHP, our healing is twofold. Here at SHP, we are the helpers. I love this quote by Fred Rogers about the helpers, right? We here at SHP, we're the healthcare providers and healthcare assistants. We're lab technicians, we're clinicians and counselors. We are called to the forefront of this crisis as first and second responders. We work to achieve the recovery efforts for our friends, for our family, for our neighbors, for our community, and our state as a whole. But we also need to give time and attention to our own care and healing. A commonly used analogy in thinking about practitioners, providers, self-care is that pre-flight safety demonstration, right? Think back to a time when we were traveling and going on planes, right? When we are in that plane, they give that demonstration about the procedure in the event of a cabin depressurization, right? In this demonstration, the flight attendant gives the passengers the instruction that if there's an emergency, you put your own oxygen mask on first, then help others. So today is all about giving you the info and skills to take care of yourself, to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can help others. Giovanna is going to continue this discussion now with information about psychoeducation, how the brain is impacted by crisis and trauma, right? So that you have that full knowledge and understanding and can work to counteract what's going on.
Thanks, Amy. So one of the main functions of our body is to keep us alive. In order to keep us alive, our body has certain automatic reflexes that turn on when we feel threatened. Another main component in keeping us safe is our body's alarm system, which is located in our brain. It's called the amygdala, which I will further discuss. We also have our nervous system, which once the amygdala turns on, it signals our nervous system to automatically respond to danger. This is where our automatic reflexes come into play. This is not something we choose, but rather something that happens automatically. They all work together to help us survive. Next slide. So survival mode is a fear-based response to threat and stress. COVID-19 is a major shift to our entire life, like work, home, socialization, running errands. and many other things. Really, it's an entire shift to the whole world, which feels overwhelming and threatening. This makes our body automatically respond to this threat and puts our body into survival mode. In this mode, we may feel many things Amy described, like emotional reactions, physical reactions, interpersonal issues, and even cognitive problems. What I do want to say is that these are all normal reactions to threat, and they're happening in our bodies and nervous system. They're working hard at trying to keep us alive. Next slide. So how our brain responds to threat. So our amygdala, again, that's our alarm system. That's located in a part of the brain called the limbic system. So our amygdala responds automatically to threat, also perceived threat in our environment based on our 5 senses. So we see threat, we can hear it, smell it, taste it, and even feel it. So as soon as it picks up something threatening in our environment, the alarm system goes off, which is our amygdala. So how is our brain reacting to COVID-19? So at this current time, we're constantly bombarded with COVID-related stuff. We're seeing and hearing it on the news and in social media, news reports, breaking news, death reports. It's all over Facebook, Instagram. We're hearing it from friends, families, neighbors are talking about it. It's difficult to avoid. So we also have triggers in our environment, like seeing people wearing masks, gloves, keeping social distancing, being afraid to touch someone or touch something in the environment. Just hearing an ambulance can trigger a fear response that's connected to COVID. I encourage you to take a look and identify your triggers. So our bodies are constantly picking up on all these small cues that may seem cognitively like insignificant, but these cues are telling our bodies danger exists and it's reacting, which is putting us all in a chronic state of survival mode. Next slide. So how does our body respond to threat? Once our amygdala picks up any kind of perceived threat or danger, it sends signals automatically to our nervous system to get us ready to fight or flight. So hormones like rush in, such as cortisol, they flood our system, which helps raise our heart rate. It gives us enough energy to like fight or flee the situation, which we'll notice like a change in our breathing. We will get tense. We will start sweating. Maybe you'll start to feel like butterflies in your stomach and other physical reactions that is getting your body ready to fight or flee. Sometimes our nervous systems pick up that we can't fight or flee, and our nervous system automatically will put us into another more passive state where we might feel like dazed, confused, maybe like it feels like surreal. We may feel paralyzed or frozen. I think we could all relate to these feelings over the past several weeks. They are all completely normal, and it's happening on this body level, and we don't choose these reactions. Although there are basic ways we can cope and help these physical feelings in our bodies. We will be discussing this later in the program. Next slide. So how trauma impacts, actually you can guess right there, how trauma impacts our autonomic nervous system. So again, we have an amygdala, which is our alarm system that helps to keep us alive and safe, but it works together with our autonomic nervous system, and that runs like along our spine. This system is what helps us stay alive, and it runs automatically without our control. It regulates our heartbeat, our blood pressure, digestion, and does so many other things to keep our body alive and like running smoothly. Interestingly, there's 2 parts to this system. There's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. They work together. So we can kind of think of it like pedals on a car. So you have the gas pedal and the brake. So if we're driving down the highway, say the New Jersey Turnpike, and we're pressing the gas, maybe speeding, and up ahead we notice an accident. What we want to do is slow down, so we press the brake. Well, our body has its own brake. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. So again, our gas pedal, which makes us go, is the sympathetic nervous system, and our body's brake is the parasympathetic nervous system. So let's talk a little bit about the sympathetic nervous system, which again is the gas. It gets us ready for fight and flight. It gets us ready to move. So when we feel fearful, anxious, our heart is racing, butterflies in our stomach, or any other uncomfortable reaction in our body, we know that the sympathetic nervous system is in charge. Normally, what we want is homeostasis or balance, and to feel in control of our body. What we want to know is that we can put on the brake and turn the parasympathetic nervous system on. So we feel like we have a little bit more control. So that parasympathetic nervous system, it calms us down and it relaxes us. When the parasympathetic system is turned on, we feel more in control. We can think more clearly and feel more social. Actually, being socially connected can help to turn the system on, along with many other things like breathing exercises, actively engaging in mindfulness, like using your 5 senses. We'll touch on these later in the webinar. Next slide. So we have 3 parts to our brain. So there's the brain stem, the limbic system, some people call it the limbic brain, and then the neocortex. And these all work together. So let's describe the brain stem a little bit. It's also known as the reptilian brain. This is the part of the brain that reacts quickly and automatically to danger. And they call it the reptilian brain kind of like because reptiles have it. So think of a lizard running and darting away quickly from possibly getting eaten. It's on guard and ready to act if that amygdala goes off. It's actually located right above our nervous system and helps us send those signals from the brain to the nervous system. So remember, the nervous system, it runs along our spine, and the brain stem is like right here above it. We also have a limbic system, or a limbic brain. That's referred to sometimes as the mammalian brain. This is this brain we share with other mammals like cats, dogs, monkeys. This part of our brain is responsible for our feelings and our emotions. This is where we feel fear, happiness, and many other basic emotions that we share along with other mammals. The limbic system and the brainstem actually work together to keep us alive, and they respond to traumatic events. The amygdala is actually located in the limbic system. The neocortex. So the neocortex, also called the prefrontal cortex, so it's like in the front part of our brain, which is the area of the brain that makes us special and human. So we have a brainstem, which we share with reptiles. We have a mammalian brain, or the limbic system, which we also share with cats, dogs, monkeys. But then what makes us special is the neocortex. This is the part of the brain that's responsible for like thinking, rationalizing, reasoning, organizing, our imagination. This is where language comes in, abstract thinking, and so many other things that make humans unique. The really fascinating aspect of this part of the brain is in the relationship to trauma. And our COVID-10 experiences, sorry, I got a little distracted. The really fascinating part of this of the brain is in relationship to trauma and our COVID-19 experiences. Our human brain actually shuts off, and it's hard to access when the amygdala and our sympathetic nervous system starts working. So when we feel scared, anxious, we go into fight, flight, freeze, feign, or flaunt, our neocortex, the human brain, it actually stops working. So when we're in survival mode, the front part of our brain, it shuts off. This is why it's so hard for many of us to think clearly during the crisis. It's difficult to make decisions, it's difficult to concentrate, it's difficult to organize our thoughts, and so many other things we take for granted. Next slide. So again, COVID-19 has put us into survival mode. And I just want to basically touch on what survival mode is. Some of us don't understand it fully. So there's fight, flight, and then more passive responses, which is freeze, fawn, or faint. So fight, which is our automatic response to physically attack or confront aggressively. So COVID-19 is difficult to physically fight, but for some of us, we may act out aggressively with others or for no known reason. It is our nervous system feeling under threat and automatically responding to stimuli. So we may get easily irritated more often or blow up on a friend or a family member. This is because we are using our sympathetic nervous system. It's turned on, it's in fight mode. And then there's flight mode, which is when we can like run or flee from danger. This is probably not accessible to our sympathetic nervous system around the COVID-19 crisis. And at times we might actually feel trapped because we're required to stay home due to like the social distancing restrictions. This is where we see some people go into fight mode. And it might look like maybe people picketing outside at our like state government offices. So they're feeling trapped and they want to fight. And their way of fighting might not be the best choice, but it's a way for them to express that mode. So, and again, their prefrontal cortex, it's not working very well. So their thinking is probably lacking in judgment. More other passive responses when we can't access fight or flight are freeze mode. And freeze mode is like when you feel paralyzed or you can't move. I've heard a lot of people say that they feel paralyzed. Fawn is when you completely hide or you comply. And then there's another mode called faint, and that's pretty much when you lose consciousness. Next slide. So why is it so difficult to think during this time? Again, this crisis has put us into fight or flight mode, or even freeze, fawn, and the sympathetic nervous system is turned on, which means our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that makes us human, is no longer connected, and it's stopped working. So that part of the brain, we need it to turn on to think clearly, to reason, make good judgments. What we really need to do to help ourselves to think better is to turn the parasympathetic nervous system on, which is what will make us feel relaxed, more in control, and it will help us to concentrate and think clearly. In a little bit, Amy and I are going to provide you with 2 ways to turn the parasympathetic nervous system on so we feel more relaxed and in control of our emotions and thoughts. But right now, Brittany's going to address strategies to further help us with thinking, concentrating, and accessing our prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that makes us human. So, Brittany.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. Great. So as Amy said earlier, it takes a lot of physical energy to do cognitive work. And for those of us working and in school, you know that this requires so much of our time and attention. Right now, we're spending a lot of extra time worrying or ruminating, and that's drawing away from the attention that we have. So what we're seeing is that we're often less productive, partly because of that cognitive deficit that we're all feeling, that drain on our energy, partly because we might be trying to work with our homes filled with people, or roommates coming in and out. We have memory difficulties. We're forgetting what we want to say. We're having a hard time staying focused or being able to concentrate. We might find our attention control is a little bit harder to maintain, right? It's quicker to pick up a phone, scroll, play a game, do things like that, and kind of fight that, those pulls on our attention or those draws on our attention. For some, it might be that we're spending more time on Netflix, reorganizing a closet that's been a mess since you moved in 7 years ago, but suddenly that seems like the place that you want to put your time and your energy. So this very, very full slide in front of us shows some of the common executive functions. And really that's just a fancy umbrella term for cognitive processes for thought and action. Moving one column in, it talks about how that impacts our daily life. So planning, for example, this is plotting a sequence of steps to achieve a goal. This can be involved with punctuality, remembering appointments and due dates, estimating how long it takes to complete certain tasks, really essential in the work that we do, or essential for being a student. Moving into the next column, we have some compensatory strategies. The third column, these are support strategies that we might need some external support around. It could be that we bring these things up as accommodations, either for work or for school, while the last column focuses on personal strategies that you could do. There's a number of different things that we could try or that we could implement. And it's really just a matter of trial and error to see what works for you and to build habits around some of these things. There's, in the resource slides at the end, there's a really great resource called the Job Accommodation Network. They offer free web chat helping you to determine what types of accommodations for your work might be best. And these things could be formalized, or it could just be informal tech strategies, like different types of apps for time and attention, things that can help you be able to do task chunking and break some of these things into manageable pieces so that you're able to work more efficiently and effectively. For the sake of time, we are not going to be able to go too in depth into a lot of these items now. You're going to get a handout that's going to have more information about some of this. And if you're interested in learning more about these compensatory strategies to manage cognitive deficit, let us know in the chat, and then we can build that into future programming that we're doing. Because there's a lot here. But know that, again, these are normal reactions. The difficulty with working memory, inhibiting automatic responses, maintaining attention control, reasoning, all of these things are being affected by our current mental state. So before we move on and before we shift focus, are there certain questions that that you have for any of us on the way the brain is working, how COVID is meeting that criteria for disaster, or some of these compensatory strategies? I just want to make sure that we're checking in before we move on into turning on that parasympathetic system. Anything? I'm just checking the chat. All right, next slide, please. So if there are any questions, just enter them and either Amy or Giovanna will be able to respond. Thank you. So now that we have an understanding of what might be happening to our body and our brains from traumatic stress, let's begin by reviewing some of the techniques needed to switch off our body's stress response. Next slide, please. So as we've talked about, people are experiencing unprecedented mental health concerns right now. Some people are experiencing an increase of symptoms or an increase of distress, while other people who have had no previous history of mental health conditions are experiencing these symptoms for the first time, and we don't know what to do. It might be an increase of symptoms of anxiety or symptoms of depression, difficulty concentrating and being able to function in various life roles. These things are being compounded by disruption to accessing our supports, our family, our friends, our social networks. It's also compounded by really legitimate safety concerns that we're having. And by utilization of negative coping skills, right? Because there are positive things that we can do, and then there are things that are not going to be healthy options. That might be consuming too much alcohol, substance use, too much isolation, too much Netflix, things like that. So before we talk about these relaxation responses and relaxation techniques, we want to talk about assessing your distress and getting a pulse on where you are. This is called the Subjective Units of Distress. It's a rating scale known as the SUDS, and it's used to measure the intensity of distress or nervousness. And usually it's used for people who have emotional distress. Currently, a lot of us are experiencing emotional distress. So it's really helpful for you to gauge where you are, especially before implementing some of these new relaxation strategies. It helps us to be able to see what works for us, what doesn't work for us, and then to be able to stay well and start to implement different types of strategies and approaches. So I want you to take a look at this slide, and you'll see that it's a 0 to 10 scale. 0 being peace and complete calm. I know I'm not there, and I know I haven't been there in at least the past 37 days, but probably longer. So I want you to just take a sec, read through these, and think about where you are today, where you are right now. Maybe consider where you've been and how much this fluctuates. For some of us, it'll fluctuate, you know, from hour to hour. For others, it might be on a daily basis. So think about where you are now, which one of these best meets your place. Hold that in your mind. We're going to start talking about these relaxation responses, and then we're going to come back to the SUDS and we're going to take another look. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is social engagement. The role of social connection is well documented in mental health and recovery research. In fact, it's included as one of the 8 dimensions of wellness, which is a holistic model of recovery endorsed by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. In the context of trauma and PTSD, we might not immediately consider the role of social support, but both research and clinical narratives show that this is really, really crucial element for people who have survived trauma. And it's also a protective factor for PTSD. So by maintaining some of our social support and social engagement, it's providing us some insulation, some protection from developing PTSD. Given the importance of social support and the role that it plays in our wellness, an important question arises. How do we maintain our social engagement while social distancing? How do we continue to engage with our community when we can't be physically present in our communities? So for a lot of us, this is going to look really different than we're used to it looking, right? We're not able to go out for coffee with a colleague. We can't attend an AA meeting or other type of support group. We're not able to spend a whole day at a Broadway theater seeing Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. Or if you're like my husband, you can't go to the gym every morning. So how are we able to prevent isolation, loneliness, and a whole host of these other unhealthy coping strategies while we're at these stay-at-home orders? So I want you to post in the chat what you've been doing. Have you found something that's really effective? I saw earlier one person posted that they're on Zoom all day and you're in front of a screen all day, that it's really hard to then want to connect with friends and family on Zoom after work. And I know I've been really feeling that Zoom fatigue too. So what are you doing? How are you connecting? How are you staying engaged with your community? For some people, it might be that they're making masks or donating food to responders or to hospital workers, picking up groceries for neighbors, buying school supplies for local families. It could be attending virtual church services or looking at virtual self-help meetings, taking a yoga class via Zoom. Some of my friends have joined virtual book clubs. I sent some of my friends flowers from a local tulip farm. My mom has gotten into sending cards, and she sends them to my kids quite a bit. There's also things like Netflix party, Disney sing-alongs, streaming Broadway musicals, visiting museums or aquariums, doing virtual tours. At the end, in the resources, there are a number of different things to combat, tools and techniques to combat social isolation and loneliness. So check those out too. Just want to see what are some people saying. Daily walks in the neighborhood, seeing neighbors at a distance, just right, that in person but far. Walking my dog, cleaning my apartment, Zoom games with friends. Old-fashioned phone calls, yes. Yeah, just being able to kind of go through your list and see who you haven't caught up with. Walking every day. Great. All right, next slide, please.
So we are going to, just making sure that you guys can hear me. So we're going to use a breathing exercise to calm our brain and our nervous system. So this breathing exercise will help us calm our sympathetic nervous system down, which is that gas pedal. And it'll help us brake to feel more in control, which turns the parasympathetic nervous system on. I'm sure many of you have tried breathing exercises, but some might not understand how and why they work. Well, when our breathing is heavy or shallow, or even our breathing is like out of control, we know that the sympathetic nervous system is on. It is putting us into fight or flight. One way to calm it down is to just simply calm ourselves down by using our breath, since it's connected to our nervous system. Normally, we don't even think about how we breathe or monitor it, but it's one key to controlling our emotions. The one thing I want to point out is that it's the exhale out that relaxes us, not the inhale. The inhale actually turns the sympathetic nervous system on, and the exhale starts to calm us down and relaxes us, and that turns the parasympathetic nervous system on. So I want you to really focus on your exhale and make it longer than the inhale. So when you breathe out, pretend like you're breathing through a straw. So when we start with one hand on our heart and one on our belly, we're doing this for two reasons. Touching your chest actually begins to connect the parasympathetic nervous system. And the hand on your belly allows us to physically feel our belly and our chest rising and falling during our breaths. And this allows us to engage in the present moment, and it helps to engage that parasympathetic nervous system. Next slide, but just don't turn that heart on yet. I just want to explain something. Okay, so the heart is here for a visual, to help us connect our breathing to a visual beating heart. It is going to move. So when the heart moves towards us, we're going to breathe in. And when it moves away from us, we're going to breathe out. Kind of like you're blowing it away, but also through that straw. Like. So remember, when we take a normal breath in through our nose, we're going to do it for 4 seconds. And we're going to try to do a longer breath out through our mouth, like we're blowing through a straw, for 5 seconds, like you're blowing that heart away. So let's practice. And you can turn the heart on now. Okay, so just to orient us, when that heart comes in, we're going to breathe in through our nose. And then breathe out. Breathe in. And then breathe out. Let's do this a few times to ourselves. I would love for this to keep going, but I know that we have limited time, so let's stop. If you have any feedback on that heart or this breathing exercise, feel free to put it in the chat. Next slide. So Amy's going to give us some grounding techniques.
So again, these techniques are really intended to bring, like Giovanna had said, that parasympathetic nervous system back on. All the effects that we were talking about of stress and this particular pandemic can be counteracted in using these techniques on a daily basis. You know, when you start to see some of those warning signs that we discussed earlier, that's when you implement this, right? So another technique that we're going to demonstrate is a grounding technique. Grounding exercises are things you can do to bring yourself into contact with the present moment, the here and the now. They are quick strategies aimed to keep your mind and your body connected and working together. These strategies that we're teaching you, different strategies work for different people. The breathing exercise may not be your jam. Maybe this grounding technique might be better suited for you, right? And again, it's helpful for many situations when you find yourself becoming overwhelmed or distracted by a distressing memory, thoughts, or feelings. So if you find yourself getting caught up with emotions like anxiety, my apologies, I am working from home with a 10-year-old, so I'm sorry about the background noise. If you catch yourself engaging in stressful circular thinking, if you're experiencing, a strong discomforting memory, you can pull out this grounding exercise. It's discreet. You can use it in any location. Even if you're working in an essential job right now, you can use this on your job site to bring you back down to baseline and bring that calm back. It helps me so very much when I'm feeling disconnected and numb. That's a common stress reaction for me. I just kind of begin to lose touch. And this brings me to the present, connecting my mind and body. So I'm going to ask for everyone to just get a little bit comfortable in the way in which you're situated and seated. And I also like to just start off with a quickly tensing all of your muscles. When you quickly tense all of your muscles, clenching your hands, your arms, your shoulders, your legs, and then you relax them and release that tension, you know that you're starting out the grounding exercise physically loose and relaxed, okay? So go ahead, if you didn't already, tense up your body, tense all your muscles real tight, squeeze, 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 let them go, relax, and get situated in your seat. And we're going to connect with our environment. We're gonna look for 5 things in our environment that we can see. So take a scan of your environment, look around, and identify 5 things that you see right now. If you like, you can put it in the chat box or you can keep it to yourself. Either way is okay. So I see my cat, I see my fan, right? I'm just scanning for things that are in my visual, my line of vision. And next, once I've identified 5 things that I can see in my current environment, I move on to 4 things that I can feel. I can feel, right, my leggings, because I'm not dressed in professional pants at this point in time. It's business from the top up, so I'm wearing my leggings. I feel my necklace, the weight of my necklace. I can feel my glasses. So you take a scan. What can you feel right now? And just focus on those things. Then you're going to move to 3 things that you can hear in your current environment. Again, taking a scan of the sounds of where you're at. Identify what are 3 things you can hear. I have a very large fish tank in my dining room. It is a 90-gallon fish tank, so I can hear that. The motor, right? I can hear the cars outside. And then you're going to move on to 2 things that you can smell. What can you smell in your environment right now? I'm drinking a big cup of coffee and I can smell that coffee. One of my comforts, I have Rook coffee on delivery, and that definitely gives me joy. So I can smell that coffee. I can smell my candle, right? Type in if you'd like, what can you smell? And then you identify 1 thing you can taste. I can certainly taste my coffee. When Giovanna, Brittany, and I were practicing this last night, Brittany's son, Carter, he's 5, so cute. He was in the room, and I asked him, Carter, what can you taste? And he said, my chicken nuggets that mommy made me. So he might have had some little bits of chicken nuggets stuck in his teeth, but he could taste them, right? So what can you taste? And you can couple this exercise with the breathing exercise that Giovanna just did. And that will, again, work at reducing your hyperarousal, bringing you back down. And Brittany's now going to walk us through, now that we've done our exercises, reassessing your SUDS.
Great. Thank you, Amy and Giovanna. Amy, I just love Counselor Amy voice. It's so soothing. I could listen to you all day, walk me through grounding exercises. So now that we've completed these, I want you to take another look at the SUDS. Do you notice a change? How does your body feel? What's your frame of mind? If you don't notice anything now, that's okay. I encourage you to try these techniques again later. Find a way to incorporate them into your day, especially when you're not on Zoom in a room filled with your colleagues or your professors. I also wanted you to know that we will be hosting another version of this webinar next week on May 7th, where we will highlight additional strategies to bring about the relaxation response. Not everything is going to be for you, but it's important to stick to it, to stick to something, try new techniques, try building up some compensatory strategies paired with a grounding activity. See what combination of things helps to bring you a sense of wellness. But no matter what strategy that you're using, try to take inventory. It can be helpful for you personally, but it can also be helpful in conversations that you're having with your loved ones. You know, letting other people know how you're feeling, what you need. You might also want to have conversations with providers and have a record of tracking your distress over a period of days or weeks. And if you continue to feel like your distress level is climbing, especially when it starts to get above 6, you might want to consider reaching out to a provider or to an expert. The crisis text line listed on this slide is a really great resource. It will instantly put you in touch with a crisis counselor. You know, even if it's just talking about anxiety you're feeling around COVID, managing all of these life roles or the disruption to your routines, those text crisis lines are really great ways in an instant to be able to get some support. Additionally, there's a number listed on the slide for the Suicide Lifeline, which provides free and confidential support all hours of the day in various languages and is also accessible for disabilities. So we've got those numbers listed. Please pass those on to friends, family, students as well. Don't forget to reach out, talk to somebody if your distress is not decreasing. So moving on, we have curated a variety of resources as well as some Rutgers specific resources. Those are all found in the slides below. I'm not going to go through all of those now. We've packed a lot of information into a really short period of time, and the three of us could easily spend hours on any one of these topics. So if there's something that you want more of or something we missed, please let us know in the chat and we can either add that into upcoming webinars or start to plan for future sessions. We are always available if you wanted to email any of us for additional content. We will be posting and sending out the slides, the recording, a transcript, as well as you'll get a handout with those compensatory strategies. We didn't get to spend a lot of time going over those, but if you want more information on them, just reach out. Before we close, we would love to be able to answer any questions that you might have. And we thank you so much for joining us this morning. So you can go ahead if you want to advance through the resource slides, and then feel free, anybody comment, put questions in the chat. Yes, and don't forget to do the survey, please. Somebody is saying, Amy, can you do a guided audio grounding that we can play? We talked about that, recording short, some of these relaxation techniques in short snippets and posting them or sending them out. So we might have to do that.
Yeah.
We will also most likely be doing an expanded version of this content. That'll be about a 90 to 120 minute length session. When is that coming up? Is that coming up on the 12th?
That's the 12th.
If you wanted to join us for more information, through the MHTTC, we're going to be doing that on the 12th, and we'll be able to go more in depth about a number of the things that were touched on today.
Thank you, Amy and Brittany and Giovanna. I see we're right at 10:30, and I want to be mindful of people's time. We do want to thank everybody. I did want to mention one more resource that will be available on Friday. I believe it is May 1st. There is a session that's specifically for faculty that will be about supporting your students during this pandemic. We know many of our students are directly impacted, either themselves or their family members. Also, being that we're in the health related, in the health professions, we know that people are impacted through their work and through their internships, et cetera. So we're going to be conducting a webinar to provide some resources and support for faculty in how to support their students, how to respond to concerns their students have, et cetera. So that'll be on Friday. That came out in the same announcement as this webinar. So please join us for that as well. And again, thank you to all who participated. We are more than happy, as was mentioned, to hear what other needs you have and how we can be able to support you in those. So thanks again to Brittany and Amy and Giovanna and to all who participated. We wish you good health, take care, be well, utilize these grounding and relaxation techniques that our presenters so effectively presented to us, and we'll work on getting some of those recordings of everybody's lovely, peaceful, calm voices. So thanks again, have a good day and be well.